You open this door with the key of reason. Beyond it is another dimension, a dimension of truth, a dimension of freedom, a dimension of joy. You're moving into the land of both the ideal and the real, of the possible and the actual. You've just crossed over into the Capitalist Corner.
Where reason meets reality, welcome to the Capitalist Corner.
Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the Capitalist Corner. I am your host, Michael Liebowitz, and Mark Pellegrino is evidently not here today. I know he was traveling. I was hoping he could make it. If he shows up, I will be sure to put him on the screen. Please remember to like, share, and subscribe to this show. I just got a text from Mark. He's trying to get on. All right. So if he gets on, we're good to go with Mark. But remember to share the show from YouTube to all your favorite social media sites, please. Also remember that although Mark is the chairperson of the American Capitalist Party and I am the vice chair, this show is not affiliated with the party, and the views that we express here are not necessarily the views of that party, of the party. I also host Irrational. You can get that where you get all your favorite podcasts. I think you will really, really like it. Let me just see if I can't get Mark on. Persephone, if you can send Mark the link by text, I don't know if you can do that, but if you can, that would be great. If you can't, I will try to do it. And of course, the news of the day is the horrible assassination of Charlie Kirk yesterday while he was speaking at a college. He was doing his, debate me thing at the college that he does, and he was assassinated, and it was absolutely horrible. And, of course we condemn that, but there's been a lot that's happened in the immediate aftermath of it and continuing till today. And just as an example, yesterday I got a text from a friend of mine, and that friend told me that the world is a horrible place. And then he called me, and I've been friends with the guy since I was 9, so I'm 49, so 40 years. And he says, you've got to take a stand on this. And I said, but I don't even know what happened yet. Mark is saying, send the StreamYard again. I just did. So anyway, we've been friends for 40 years, and he told me I have to take a stand. And I'm telling him, I don't know enough about this. And he says, our constitutional rights are blah, blah, blah. And he keeps going on and on. And I'm telling him, what do you think that I have to add that hasn't already been said? Especially when I don't listen to, to Charlie Kirk's show. I don't know much about him, and I don't know much about the shooting. And the friend ultimately got upset and, hung up with me. And then he posted something on Facebook about he posted something and said, if anybody disagrees with me, they can defriend me right now, that sort of thing. I noticed you could just see my Rational Egoist banner. Let me pull it a little closer so you can no longer see it. Anyways, but that was just one indication of this. And a principle that I follow whenever big events happen is I keep my mouth shut until I know what the hell is going on. I wish more people would do that. A prominent libertarian influencer within minutes, of the shooting, they had this poor guy, and, they were detained this guy. I don't know who the guy is, whatever. And, this libertarian influencer posts, let me find it so I can read it exactly what was said, because I really want to capture this. And what I want to do today is really show the sort of gamut of reactions to what occurred. So the guy says about about the alleged gunman at the time yesterday, who turned out he was released. He was not the gunman. And he says about this guy, this boomer who believes everything the television says to him and who probably obeyed every useless COVID measure because he thought it was keeping people safe, just shot Charlie Kirk for holding opinions. Okay. there's a lot just in that he assumes he knows about this guy. He assumes that he knows the motive. He assumes he knows that this guy did it. He assumes the guy's guilty. And he's posting this with a picture of this guy on the internet. And the guy's got 400,000 followers. And somebody's in the chat asking me who it is. I don't want to get into that because I don't want to make it about a personal thing against anybody, because this is a principle that's very important. It's not okay to rush to judgment on issues and just spew them out onto social media. Now, I don't know what the motivation it is to do this. It could be you don't want to get scooped. You want to be the first to, get the fresh take out there. Could just be outright grift where you're just being dishonest to attain followers. Could be acting on emotion. There's so much there. And this isn't actually about my friend Dan. This is somebody else that I'm talking about. But there's so much going on in this guy's response. I've seen other responses that have said the left did this, the left are crazy. I've seen people say we're at war. I've seen people celebrating. People that were, evidently critics of the guy celebrating his death. All this to me is so just gross and unhinged, calling for war, pointing fingers, castigating entire groups of people when you have no even information about the particular person that shot Charlie. That's just not okay. Celebrating somebody's murder is not okay. Calling for war is not okay. These things are really just a very vile thing to do. Now, lest it be thought that everybody is doing this, it's not, because a lot of people are out there calling for unity. A lot of people are out there that disagree with Charlie and they're sending their condolences. There's people all over the political spectrum that are condemning this in absolutely in no uncertain terms, and are very sad about it and are calling for calm. So with that said, I'm very interested to get what the audience thinks here. And I also want to get Mark on. Mark is buffering. He says, Mark Pellegrino is here. Okay.
What's up, man?
Hey, Mark. We're talking about the Charlie Kirk situation, and if anybody knows about the abundance and variety of responses that I've seen on social media, it's Mark, because I blasted him with all of them at about 3:00 this morning. So it says he's on Blue Sky and saw 0 posts celebrating the shooting. I've seen them. I don't think they're common. I'm just saying they're there, and that's a vile thing. A vile thing to do. And I get that there's a lot of vile people on the internet, but look at Trump's response. I mean, Trump is the president of the United States, and instead of getting on there and calling for unity, patience, and peace, he's out there saying leftist ideology caused this, and we're going to find this, and the leftists need to be stopped. And it's really a lot of emotionalism, a lot of tribalism. And I got to tell you, it's left me very demoralized over the past couple days, just to see the tribalism and the emotional responses, the lack of patience, the lack of calm. It's very, very, very bad. Ann M says the people celebrating it made Trump's point. And I got to disagree with you. You can find random people out there to say anything that you want, and anything you want to find. By and large, people are not celebrating this. We don't even know who killed the guy, let alone their motives for doing so. We need to wait. And even if it was a left-wing lunatic, that does not mean that everybody that's left the center is responsible for this. As Nancy Mace said yesterday, the Democrats need to own this. Right? That is just absolutely absurd for her to say such a thing. And a big problem, I think, Mark, and then I'm going to shut up and let you talk, is it seems that people on both sides of the aisle have created straw men of the people that they think of their enemies. They no longer just see them as people with differences of opinion. They see them as evil enemies that are conspiring to do very, very bad things. And then they blast their hatred at these people. Just not good at all. Go ahead, Mark.
Well, the one thing that I like about the left is that it doesn't disconnect politics from ethics, and of course that makes them fanatical sometimes, and it makes them point the finger at the right and say you're evil. But what are you if you betray your values? But you're not good. You're certainly not good. And what are you if you're working towards values that are antithetical towards what the left says is good? Well, you're evil. The problem is in a representative republic where we're supposed to subordinate might to right, individual rights are supposed to reign supreme. It's the principle upon which our society is founded, which means I may think you're evil, but if you haven't done anything to literally physically harm me or someone else, then I have to persuade you that your position is wrong. I can't use force against you. You can't use force against me. We persuade one another through vigorous dialogue, debate, writing op-eds against each other, and then let the people on your team, the people on the other team decide who's right and who's wrong. But the I think the immediate fallback to physical violence when when one side isn't getting its way is a terrible precedent that I think was set quite a while ago. I think it was really set in the '60s when this kind of violent protests, not of this sort, but protests of the violent sort became legitimized in people's eyes. So that now walking through the streets, breaking things, is not necessarily seen as a bad thing. Lots of people can justify breaking store windows when they're walking down the street or damaging property. It's just property, Michael. It's not violating anybody's rights. And after all, it's a political protest, so they have a right to do these kinds of things. Those kinds of they've expanded their notion of what protest is to incorporate this kind of violence. And I'm not assuming that the person who did this is on the left. I don't know who did this. What scares me is that this person is still at large and people are making huge assumptions about the person, which, quite frankly, could enable this guy to escape justice. I can't read that because I had to get on my phone in order to get
I
on.
will read it to you. It's from Akira Felix, and he says they kind of have to, meaning blame the whole left. They kind of have to, Michael. This is no different from the left blaming the right for January 6th. They could have said that Trump was the one to blame, but they wanted to blame everyone on the right. Right. Yeah, I agree it's the same, and I think it's wrong in both instances. I think that it's very sloppy thinking when we use terms like the left to castigate entire groups of people, because within that grouping are people with vastly different opinions. Within the right, for instance, you could say the right and you're covering people from William F. Buckley, Barry Goldwater, Ronald Reagan, onto your Pat Buchanan's, and nowadays Nick Fuentes is counted on the right. So you're really not communicating what you want to communicate when you're using these terms. So I condemn it in both areas. I think that the tribalism in this country is absolutely absurd, and I really wish that we could have a breakthrough. I wish that it could stop. I don't know the solution now. Jim
But I think
Valiant,
now, Michael, I got to say, I think now when you're describing left or right, it is the most outrageous elements that people are thinking of. Even those elements are cartoonish, they exist, and because they're morally consistent, they define the left and the right now. So it's not the moderate, whatever moderates may be out there, quote unquote moderates. I don't really like the term moderate, but whatever moderates may be out there, it's the AOCs, the Bernie Sanders, the squad that is defining what the left is right now. It's the Mondamis who are defining what the left is, because that's the most consistent expression of leftism today. And with respect to the right, it's the MAGA movement that's taken it over. It's rampant nationalistic fervor with a Judeo-Christian spin that has taken over the right, and that's roughly what people mean. Even though, if we were to speak about the right in broad terms, it would also include libertarians and people who would think constitutional conservatives and people who think more along our lines. It's still the guys who are the most consistent and loudest that become the defining the defining characters in those movements, and that's what people are referring to when they refer to left. And look, people like Maxine Waters, even Chuck Schumer, a cliche, lifetime politician, have gone out there and they've ginned up the population. They've made them um, accustomed to the idea that it's legitimate to physically even abuse your political opposition. And I think because we've seen such a massive, one-sided exercise of this fake privilege on the left, people are just presuming that the killer's got to be on the left because the left is violent.
And by the way, if you put a gun to my head and said you've got to get this right, where on the political spectrum is the person? My guess would be the left, because I'd have to guess. But I ultimately don't know. Even though, yes, there's reports coming out that the bullets had messages on them with Antifa slogans or some such thing, or trans slogans. But to me, that is not, it's certainly evidence, but it's not proof of anything, because we don't yet know who the person is and what that person's motive
Well,
is.
doesn't that the message on the bullet strikes with that Mangione character who killed the CEO for that life insurance company? That's exactly what he did when he killed it. When he
Oh,
killed,
really? I don't even, there's so
he,
many of these things. Like
he wrote
I
messages on
forget.
his bullets. Yeah.
But but I don't know who put those messages. I don't know if it was an attempt to throw them off the scent of who did it. It could be somebody just trying to stir stuff up. We don't know yet. And that's what I mean, is we have to take in the evidence and adjust our viewpoint as the situation materializes. But we ought not to be on social media shooting our mouths off about how we know what happened. And back to the left-right thing, Mark. You gave a synopsis of what people might think when terms left and right come up. I don't think that way. I try to be precise in my thinking, right? I don't want to use vague generalities based on what somebody else might take it to mean when I'm communicating it. So when you say the left, or there's been a lot of they killed Charlie Kirk. There was a post from a prominent objectivist this morning that said they killed Charlie Kirk for telling people to prove him wrong. So it's a they for one, which he has no clue if it's a they, and he has no clue what the motive is, but yet he's out there saying this stuff. And I agree, Mark, that the Maxine Waters and Chuck Schumers of the world have behaved vilely, and I think there's enough of that to go around. But that still doesn't justify blaming an entire group of people, many of whom, the left, or the people on I have positions that you might say are left, and the war on drugs, that could be a left-wing position. Open immigration, there's another one. So am I on the left? I certainly don't think so, but somebody might say that. Pro-choice, right? But there's also this thing going around right now out there that only the left engages. This is, I've seen this all over the place. Only the left engages in political violence. It was only a couple months ago that these people in Minnesota, I think it was somebody that was in the assembly in Minnesota, a lady was assassinated, a Democrat, by a right-wing guy.
We should say, it would be a better use of language, Michael, because the left is, I think, when I go back to the National Assembly in France, the left or the Jacobins, they were the ones who
goes back to the French Revolution. Yeah.
Right, and they were indeed crazy. They were radical democratists, and they started basically a world war before World War I. They ignited the entire continent of Europe in war because violence was their bag. But I would say this, Michael, because the violence also exists on the left, I would say collectivism is inherently violent, and so I think collectivists, especially those who buy the premises hook, line, and sinker, not just those who are pragmatic about it and just take little bits and pieces of it and don't really practice it in life, but those who actually think this is an ideal political perspective, the right-wing nationalists and the left-wing communists and the spectrum that exists within there, those people are violent. Those are the ones you'll find committing violence on the left, and those are the ones you'll find committing violence on the right, because they think it is an appropriate a means of expression of political expression. And for some on the left, if you see the American Communist Party now trying to take advantage of the chaos, their whole perspective is: look, America's through. It's time now to fight. Stop politicking. Stop fighting. Stop talking. Stop. Persuasion is done. Break out the guns and start the war. This is stuff that Haz al-Din is saying on social media. His buddy Ed B. Liger is saying this on social media. This, to me, is incitement, and they should be jailed for that, because they are literally trying to capitalize on the chaos that we're experiencing now to foment a violent revolution. And they're not kidding. They're serious. I can't read what that says. So you
It
might
says,
want
do you remember a lot of people mocking the Paul Pelosi attack? I remember that. I remember the Paul
Yes.
Pelosi attack. January 6th. The problem is, a lot of this comes in when what we've talked about a lot is sort of the ecosystem, the MAGA ecosystem, where they pretend like these things don't actually happen. For instance, I was just telling the audience about a friend of mine who posted on Facebook that he's a big Charlie Kirk fan, and he says that our constitutional liberties are in danger, and if you disagree with that, then unfriend me. And someone said to him, I don't remember you being this up in arms when that woman was killed in Minnesota. So why the vitriol now? And what happened with Paul Pelosi? And he says, oh, Paul Pelosi was killed by his boyfriend. Now he
wasn't killed, but
or he was attacked by his boyfriend. Yeah, attacked by his boyfriend. He must have. Now he, imbibes that ecosystem that we're talking about. So he must have heard it there. He didn't just make it up on his own, but then he holds it to be true. And that's where we are. And I really just wish that more people were more level-headed. I want to live in the world that where ideas dominate, where we discuss ideas, we debate ideas, the best ideas win, right? Once somebody picks up a gun, you're saying that ideas can no longer be exchanged and debated. It's pointless. And I don't think we're there.
Not to use that as a segue, but precisely my argument with respect to Gaza. It is a rejection of civil life. It is a rejection of civilization. It's a rejection of rights. When you do that thing, you are now stepping outside of civilized society to do that. And I think it's important for people, anybody, even I don't think anybody in this chat or in our listening audience could even be thinking about this kind of action. But if you are, just remember, you're stepping outside of reason. You're stepping outside of the laws that men have created in order to live peaceably amongst each other.
Now, how do you feel about this? I mean, and I want to get your feelings, because your feelings are a result of your judgments. And I had a nice talk, Jim Valiant. I was up early this morning texting with Jim. It was maybe 2:00 where he is. And then we talked later on. And Jim is often very helpful to me when I'm going through psychological crises. And I just feel with the attack on the woman, I can't pronounce her name, but the woman on the train, the attack on the murder of Charlie Kirk, the murder of her, and these things are bad in of themselves. They could be demoralizing just that these happen. But the responses from so many people, and I get it. People keep telling me it's just social media. Okay. I get it. I get that this doesn't happen when I go out. But some of these people that are on social media that say this stuff, I know personally, right? Kids that I grew up with, that I've known for 30, 40 years. And some of these people that are spouting this stuff have hundreds of thousands, if not millions of followers. So it's not just limited to social media. And I'll snap back from it, Mark, you know what I mean? But for right now, I feel like reason, optimism, purpose, individual liberty, I just feel like we're being defeated by irrationalism and collectivism and emotionalism.
We've been saying for a long time on the show that emotionalism rules the day. And we've been saying for a long time that, look, the right has openly rejected the Enlightenment. Just look at the Prager University videos against the Enlightenment that blames all of the problems we're having today on individualism. Now, if that isn't twisted, I don't know what is. So, and you see a public, Michael, when you see the video of that poor woman being assaulted and murdered on the train, the before and the after, the deadness of people on the train itself, the fact that nobody really would help her at first. I know somebody came to help her at a certain time, but as the perpetrator was walking away, now there's a certain part of me that understands, a guy, a maniac with a knife isn't something that everyday people want to approach. Not even people who really know what they're doing want to approach. But there is a general passivity and acceptance of extreme violence in our culture today. There's a general sense of that extreme violence is an acceptable means of expression. That you're because we're emotionalized now, as opposed to enshrining reason the way our founders wanted it to be. Our emotions are our tools of cognition now. So what we feel is more important than what is, and so that's why you get these outrageous and I think in a way contextless uh, tweets, saying the things that they're saying. People are just ginned up emotionally, and that's what they're responding to. It's sort of like I don't know. It's like a mass circle jerk. Everybody's in their own world. Has their own, their own. Uh, this idea, this straw man in their head that they're attacking, and they just continually attack it. And we see it publicly because they're doing it on social media. But everybody's got a straw man about everybody else. I see that even with respect to myself. The people who attack me online attack me for things. It's like I've never said that. I've never suggested anything that enables you to make that claim justified against me. But they're not fighting me. They have an idea that they've cemented in their mind, and it enrages them. And I really think they get off on the rage. They feel a sense of identity from the rage. The people in these tribes feel a sense of identity by being anti-right or anti-left, and that becomes their identity, not the truth. Not trying to be a better person, but identity through this tribal, this tribal place where where the leaders of the tribes, all they really care about is exciting their feels, right? And that seems to be the world that we're living in now, and that's a little bit scary.
Very. So in this, and Anne, I'm not trying to pick on you, but you've posted something that I think is demonstrative or illustrative of the type of things that we're talking about. And she says here, it's not even just here. It's Sophie from Dundee, I believe it's in Scotland, thinking she needs an axe and knife to protect herself from migrants. And then she says all these things add up to anger. Now, I happen to remember this story about the little girl in Scotland with the axe in her hand. And I remember the narrative being pushed that that the kids in Scotland, they're carrying these things, and women, the men aren't protecting them, and the women need to protect themselves from migrants. And I remember hearing that the explanation was BS. So I just Googled this really quickly, and I asked about this video, and this is what we have here. It says the video and image of a girl with an axe in Scotland are legitimate, but the story was fueled by false claims and misinformation online. A factual incident that took place in Dundee in August 2025 was widely amplified with an incorrect, far-right driven narrative. This is the facts. The incident occurred where a 12-year-old girl in Dundee, Scotland, was involved in a street confrontation where she brandished the hatchet and the knife. The incident took place with a couple from Bulgaria. The police charged the 12-year-old girl with possession of offensive weapons. The girl was later referred to the Scottish Children's Reporter Administration. The Bulgarian man and woman were also charged in connection with the incident. So that's what happened. The online story is that it says viral social media post amplified by far-right figures and influencers like Elon Musk, and I did see Elon Musk posting this, and Tommy Robinson claimed the girl was heroically defending her sister from migrant men. The police in Scotland explicitly warned the public not to spread misinformation. They confirmed they found no evidence to support claims that the youth were at risk of sexual assault by the couple, because that's what the narrative was saying, that there was these immigrants coming to Scotland and they were raping the women. The person filming the video is a legal immigrant from Bulgaria, and he stated that he never touched the girls and was not an asylum seeker. But this stuff was online for a while. And a lot of our narratives are fueled by exaggerations and misinformations, and people become inflamed by them.
By people who want clicks, by people who want followers, by people who have
Yes.
constituents that they're now trying to please, and those lies go viral before the quiet truth comes out.
So Ann M is insistent now that that her version is correct. Now here's the problem, and this is where you run into it, right? Okay, we could have Ann come on the show. We're not going to. I'm just saying we could, and tell us her version of events, where her source. We could then post an abundance of sources that refute that, and then it comes to the point where, well, why is your source better than my source? But I would argue that if that's the case, then the proper position is to hold no position and just say we can't know the truth. It's not to pick one side of the story. And yes, I've seen it. And you don't just pick the one side of the story and then become enraged by it.
Hey,
Right?
Michael, I wanted to point out something that deeper what Diego said, because I actually said this something like this in a post to somebody who claimed, well, we've never been in times as violent as these, and I sort of made a similar point with Deeper Diego. He says we are much better today in 2025 in connection to safety and rights than in the 60s and 70s, for example, where there were insane levels. I think it means ubiquitous assassinations, explosions, murder attempts in the 60s and 70s that people today cannot understand. I mean, I remember the Wobblies riots. I mean, the communist infiltration into labor groups that caused massive. Like the Pullman strikes, massive, violent strikes and turmoil. The anarchists in the early 20s who were blowing things up and plotting against the United States government. The 60s with all of their assassinations and violent protests and violence throughout the South and violence throughout the nation. The Watts riots, and even into the 90s as crime started to diminish. The riots in '94 that were caused by the Rodney King incident. I mean, it's not like this stuff is new to America. We tend to think that because it's happening, to us, it's never happened before. And so there's a tendency to catastrophize all this. And plus, since we see so much of it, all we see on the news is what bleeds. And so we tend to think that that's the way the world is. And that isn't necessarily the way the world is. And Race also said something that I thought was interesting. What do you think of this statement? Charlie Kirk said some gun deaths are worth it in order to have the Second Amendment, years before he was shot and killed in Utah. That's what Snopes posts
Yeah.
after his murder. So that's a terrible, I mean, it's a true thing that he said, terribly
Yeah.
ironic given the circumstances, and a shitty fucking thing for Snopes to post.
I agree. I mean, I don't know, it's true. I believe I've seen that all, unless every source I've seen lied about it, but I've heard that he said that. I don't know why you would mention it, but whatever.
Because it's a laugh. It's the irony of it. For them, it's a joke. Look at this guy. He defended the Second Amendment, and how did he defend it? By saying some deaths are acceptable uh, because this right is more important than the fact that some mistakes will happen, basically, or that some cruelty will happen as a result of it. And here he is, the victim of that very same ideology that he was posing to people. Now, that's certainly not a great way of saying it. That's like Stalin saying you gotta break a few eggs to make an omelet. That disregards the value of individual life. I think you could have come at that concept of the inviolability of the Second Amendment in a very different way. But for Snopes to do that, it's an
Well,
attack.
hold on, Mark, because this is, and this is part of it, could be part of our problem. Ian Gilmore says Snopes is posting that as an answer to people questioning whether it's true or not. They are not posting it to attack Kirk.
So they're simply posting it to prove that
If
he had
somebody
said.
asks, is this correct? Then they say yes.
Oh, okay. I
That's
thought
what's
I thought it was literally a commentary on It wasn't just a fact check. It was a commentary on him, which is a fancy way of saying, well, look at that, but dot dot dot. I don't know.
Yeah. Ann M says Snopes leans left. That's the type of thing. Like I just don't want to get into it. I don't like. To me, the political spectrum of left and right in this country, I disagree with both sides vehemently. And whenever we get into, oh, but they lean left. Well, okay, but I could do the same thing with another source. Well, they lean right. I don't know. I don't follow Snopes. It's not my jam. We're responding to a question by Race Jacobson. Once it's pointed out that we might be wrong, I'm quick to say, oh, okay, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it's something else. I don't ultimately know. What I do know is that there's a lot of jumping to conclusions out there. And that's what I really want to speak against. I want to get people to think, to come out and weigh different sources of information and not be so cocksure until you have all the information.
Yeah, I would agree with that, but passions are running high right now, and I'm interested in seeing how the investigation will go. There was a part of me sarcastically that thought it can't be a guy on the left. He can shoot so well.
Oh my
I know
God.
I know that's a terrible thing to think, but I mean that whoever pulled this off in a stunningly professional fashion.
Anne asks if somebody was wearing a short skirt, but it's lost to me who she's talking about. And if you could tell us who you're talking about, because I don't know. But back to the Race, it's a shocking thing to say, and people push back on this kind of thing all the time. Ian Gilmore wonders if Kash Patel's FBI is not catching this guy. So, but my real
not catching them on purpose.
I don't know if it's maybe not good enough. But what I really, how do we help to fix how do I put this? How can we help to influence the epistemological situation in this country? And I don't want to get in highfalutin words. How do we get people to think critically, to use reason and not emotion to arrive at opinions, to not just accept the first thought that comes into their head or the first emotion that comes in? Because that's what needs to take place.
Well, overall, you have to do what ARI is trying to do, which is embed itself in the academic community so that these ideas become a part of the culture. Now, and of course, that's a multi-generational issue. It's taken us many generations to get to the point we are today, right? Many generations since Dewey of this anti-rational, emotionalistic, social-based education to have its effect, to bear the kinds of fruits that we're seeing today. So ARI, I think, is taking steps in the right direction, but it's such a long game that it doesn't help you or I. All we can hope for is our message gets out there, and an accumulation of competitive shows that have the same kind of orientation as we do towards reality and reason get out there, and they start to take over the culture. Now, social media doesn't seem like it's particularly primed for rational discourse, right? It seems like it promotes something else. And maybe there's something that the tech companies can do on their own to promote rational discourse.
Years ago, Nicole Hingle says, keep asking what evidence supports your statement. Years ago, I read a book called Good Thinking Goes Bad. It was a book on critical thinking. And that's what the guy said. What's your evidence? And I always do that. Okay, what is your evidence for this? Akira Felix, I'll put it up on the screen. For instance, Akira Felix says, I think Iran or Qatar are behind this. Okay, what evidence do you have for that? Because you're making a claim online that you think it's this way, but what evidence is there of that? This just happened.
And why particularly Charlie Kirk? It says because they couldn't get. We know that there's evidence to suggest Iran was going after Trump, right? But
That's
why would they go after Charlie Kirk?
Yeah, I don't know. But
why not JD Vance? Why not Kash Patel? Why not somebody else who's higher up in the quote unquote Trump minion world?
I've also seen somebody say that Israel is
Everybody
behind
says Israel's behind it. And
everything, right?
Israel is behind everything.
Now, so Ian Gilmore, to answer my previous question, says we can hold ourselves and the people we interact with to higher standards. I agree, but here's the problem, right? And I don't know that this is what you meant by it, Ian. It's just what's happening in my head, is what I'm thinking about. Is people will tell me, for instance, you should just, if somebody is irrational or they're dishonest, just don't engage them, don't debate them, just ignore them. The problem is, if we do that, if we just limit ourselves to all the people that are irrational now, that's fine. And we can come on a show like this and we can talk about it, but we're not having any impact. What I'm looking for is to impact people, to get people to think, to ask themselves, what evidence do I have for this claim? To take their time, as Ian Gilmore says. That's what I'm hoping to do. I'm kind of hoping, Mark, that our show that we have coming up will help people to do that. There was a time in my life when the first thought that came into my head, I thought was true. You know what I mean? It would ever happen. So if someone cuts in front of me in line, they did it on purpose. That's just there. I didn't stop and say, well, wait a second. Maybe he didn't see me, or maybe something's going on with him that has nothing to do with me. I would jump to the conclusion immediately that it's disrespect. Now I don't do that. I try to ask myself, okay, but why? What's going on? What's the situation? What's the evidence? That's what I think needs to happen. And it just seems like people in, a lot too many people have no appetite for that, I guess is what I'm saying.
Well, Michael, there's a good maxim that comes from a book by Stephen Covey called the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People.
Great book.
Which has a lot of principles that are objectivist adjacent. And one principle that I think aligns with exactly what you said is seek first to understand, then be understood. Seek first to understand, then be understood. Now, that's what I try to do in regular discourse with people like this. When we're one-on-one with each other, I try to suss them out, feel out what their position is, and then tell them my position. Then we have a very vigorous and interesting and never hostile discussion, unlike social media, which I think the algorithm, the programming of the medium itself promotes kind of violent discourse with each other, and feelings-based arguments over facts. And that's why I think the least rational people out there become very popular. Look how popular Candace Owens has become. The crazier she's become, the more popular she's become. The crazier Tucker Carlson has become, the more anti-principled. He's not even unprincipled. It seems anti-principled at this point. The more popular he's becoming. Now, to me, that bespeaks a culture that it really has a lot of anti-rationalism built into it, a nihilism, a deep nihilism built in, and a cynicism, that's starting to bubble to the surface. It shows that it's probably the most dominant sensibility that people have now. I mean, what do you see on the left and the right but cynicism, and then politicians, grifter politicians taking advantage of that cynicism and trying to leverage it to get more power?
Yeah, there's something going on with the chat right now is about Charlie Kirk being MAGA. Yeah, he was MAGA as far as I know. That's an interesting thing for me, is I have not really been a follower of his. I haven't paid attention. I've seen, clips that come across my feed of him debating, or posts that he puts on X. But I don't, other than that, I haven't followed him. I know that he and I don't align politically. That's whatever. There's people I'm friends with that I don't align with politically. But I don't know. There's like this space now, Mark, that we're in, where Iryna is pointing out in the chat Charlie Kirk's views, right? He's not a rights guy. He didn't believe in separation of church and state. He didn't support individual rights. And there's this thing now out there, like, that's, what's the word I'm looking, like, we're not supposed to do that any longer. Like, you can't talk about somebody's positions once they're dead, or once they've been killed. You have to elevate them and pretend things are different. I don't see why we can't still say we disagree with him. I don't hate the guy. I didn't hate him before. I certainly don't hate him now. But given the positions I've seen him take, I've disagreed with them.
Yeah, I mean, I saw the guy when he was first coming up. I knew that he was going to be a star in the conservative movement. It wasn't hard to see, just like I figured Candace Owen would before she went off the reservation after her breakup with Ben Shapiro. Uh, I knew both of them would be stars in the conservative world, but I feel like whatever conservatism was, and I always looked at it in a way that I don't even think most prominent conservatives did, as the conservation of classical liberalism. Even though he seemed in the beginning to tend towards that, they all shifted, with the MAGA movement. They all shifted. That includes guys like Dave Rubin. I mean, Dave Rubin came from the Young Turks. I was the first objectivist he ever interviewed on his show. He brought on a spate of objectivists after that. He was flirting with objectivism as a political ideology, as not as a philosophy that would ground his political ideology, I should say. And then he met Jordan Peterson, who Jordan Peterson is the kind of, I don't want to say monster, but he's certainly the kind of intellectual that a rudderless, philosophicalless people look to for guidance, because he seems to have the answers, because he talks in a complicated way. He sounds very academic, even though what he's saying is mostly old shit packaged in a different bag, and a lot of it is extremely damaging. Nevertheless, all of these folks shifted in that direction, and I don't know if Trump was the seismic activator that pushed everyone in that direction, but I thought Charlie Kirk was more like a constitutional conservative in his youth, and then became the MAGA Judeo-Christian, but because that's where the money was, man. And maybe he came off as a fairly sincere, honest guy. When I would see him speak, he was a patient speaker with people. He was fairly articulate, even if he was wrong. And a lot of the things he was saying, even the bare facts of what he was saying, was oftentimes wrong. He's still on some level, I hate to say this, grifting he's playing to a particular group. You know what I mean? And his principles shifted accordingly. Like Candace Owen is now, what is she? Full blown conspiracy theorist, Jew hating. I mean, I don't even know the monster I'm looking at now in comparison to what was, the BLM fighting crusader for, I don't know, for decency and reason at one time. And I think Charlie fell into that as well, right? He took a sip of the Kool-Aid, found that the Kool-Aid was making him rich and popular, and went that way, man.
I'm big on speaking out against the whole influencer class, right? And it's in large part because of what you're saying, Mark. I've mentioned this before. It's Warren's mentioning again. People have told me that I should behave a certain way online or on my podcast or on here. That doesn't reflect who I really am, or it doesn't reflect my ideas. And they tell me that I can, that's the word I'm looking for. I can make a name for myself and then return to my character later on. And I have no doubt that I could build an audience by being inflammatory, or by catering to people, or by capitalizing on my years in prison by doing, what's the word I'm looking for here? Prison sensationalism. You know what I mean? Like, talk about prison stuff. There's a podcast that does that, probably more than one, but one that I know of for sure. But that's not the world that I want to live in. That's not the person that I want to be. Right. I don't want to do that. I want to be somebody that tells the truth. As I see it. I could be wrong, and when I am, I'll admit it. I want to behave with integrity, and that's the goal. And it doesn't mean that I'm never going to screw up. The other day, I lost my cool. I got aggravated with a commenter, and I got emotional. I'm not going to be always perfectly rational, but that's the goal. That's what I'm striving for, and that's what this show is about. And I just hope that the people are, somebody once said, I don't remember who it was, are better angels. I hope that we can have some sort of an impact on the rationality of people, because this violence is definitely just not the answer. I don't want to live in a violent country. I don't want to worry about being harmed, or my loved ones being harmed because somebody perceives that they have some political view, or even if they do have a political view.
Believe me, that idea, which is sort of a legitimate fear, stalks me every day because I'm open about my political perspectives. A lot of people have created straw men about who I am, and I'm a public figure. I'm easy to find in that sense. I can be recognized in a crowd where other people can't, and they have anonymity on their side, and it's a little bit scary sometimes to think about that. Ariana says, "I don't think anyone is saying people should be killed for ideas. What I'm saying is that he promoted ideologies and fostered a culture of religious war and violence found him. Well, he certainly promoted a culture that was faith prominent."
She's responding to another commenter, Mark, just so you know. Like,
Okay,
she's not
well,
responding to anything we said. I just want you to know she's not saying that we're suggesting.
I know that, but I wanted to maybe this is out of context or out of place. I don't know, but I definitely wanted to say this is true. He espoused anti-rational ideas, and he fed the anti-rational portions of our country that are growing in number, growing in strength, and growing, unfortunately, in vitriol and passion. and But she says something here: extremism usually leads to extreme outcomes. I also want to say that we are extremists. And objectivists have a perspective about extremism that I think is unique, because it's a bad word lately. It's a bad word. It's been a bad word. It's usually what somebody tags you with to make the claim that you're out of touch. Your thoughts are not in alignment with reality. But extremism only means consistent, folks. Most very consistent. Now, those thoughts could, in fact, be out of line with reality. Marxists don't have thoughts respecting economics or society or ethics that are in alignment with reality. But you could also be an extremist in the sense that Michael and I are, and that we believe that values are objective, that virtues are objective, that we can reduce many of our principles to observable reality, and that reality is the arbiter for everything that we do. And we're extremists with respect to that, which is why it doesn't matter if somebody came to us and offered $1 billion to change our perspective. I wouldn't do it. I don't think Michael would do it. We would stay exactly as we are, unless something in reality shows us that we are wrong, in which case we would be obligated to change our perspective. But Michael, I think now we live in a primacy of consciousness world where Trump is the epitome of it. He's the paragon of the primacy of consciousness model. And that's what I think a lot of people are operating on now, particularly the most vocal and virulent members of the left and the right. They're primacy of consciousness people. It doesn't matter what reality is showing them. It matters what they think and feel about it.
Yeah, Dangerous Loaf of Bread is commenting on the bullets that we already talked about earlier. Sorry, Dangerous, but you weren't here. We have mentioned the bullets that you're discussing with the messages on them.
Yes, Akira Felix says objectivism is radical, extremism is a package deal. I think that's a great formulation, Akira. Thank you.
Yes, it is.
Manu says, I'd rather call you guys absolute. And that's true. I like that too. When you say that you're a free speech absolutist, you're an individual rights absolutist. That is a great, that's also a very good formulation too. But I don't want to run away from extremism because it's been co-opted in the way that capitalism has been co-opted and the way selfishness has been co-opted. It automatically means something terrible in somebody's eyes.
Well, it came up. The problem is it came up in the chat, Mark, where so I'm going to have to do this partly by memory. Ariana was talking about how extremism tends to lead to bad things. And then Ann M responded, I got it right here. She's, I guess you're new to the movement. Rand wrote again, smearing people as extremists. The problem is, it's what are you extreme about?
Yes.
Right? The point that Ayn Rand made in Extremism in the Art of Smearing, or the art of Smearing, it was in Capitalism Under an Ideal. The point she made is that just saying somebody's extreme doesn't tell you anything. I extremely want to survive. I'm extremely
I extremely like breathing air. I extremely
like
breathing
so
air.
extreme. So you have to add content to that when you're discussing about it. And that's sort of I guess kind of what we're talking about. I don't know what he was too extreme on.
Well, look, I mean,
I'm just
he was.
This is the thing. I'm not saying Charlie Kirk was extreme on anything. Like I said, I
You
didn't
know what? You know
follow
what?
him.
But Michael, I think one of the comments that I'm seeing a lot on social media that may have a basis in truth is that he was extreme about, he was extreme about debating, about talking to people, and that's not, people don't like talking about values anymore. At least it doesn't seem that way. And he was able to sit down and talk with people and persuade quite a few people to come to his side. The fact that he was persuasive, I think, was probably his downfall.
Yeah. So Ian Gilmore says the problem with Charlie Kirk wasn't that he was extreme; it's that he was wrong and irrational. Like I said, I've seen things he said that I disagreed with. I know that he and I wouldn't have aligned politically. I wasn't saying he was extreme. I didn't follow him enough to make that kind of a judgment. What I'm saying is that it does matter what you're extreme on. Extremism can be a good thing. It doesn't have to be a bad thing.
In some respects, he lent a veneer of credibility to the Trump movement, right? Because he seemed like he was a fairly rational, moderate guy, despite his, Judeo-Christian background and his belief that, we are a Judeo-Christian nation and the concept of our liberties somehow comes from
Well, that's not
Judeo-Christian.
reasonable. I mean, so that's that Ian Gilmore wants
But
to
no,
be.
I said he gave the veneer of reasons
Oh, okay.
because
Yeah, you're right.
because unlike Trump, he was measured in the way he spoke. Because unlike Trump, he was considerate to other people when they spoke. He actually seemed to listen to them, take in their ideas, and then tried to counter them as rationally as he possibly could. That's very un-MAGA. That's not where Trump sits in this world. And so, in a sense, he was the sort of he gave the MAGA movement the appearance of reason because he went out there and openly discussed ideas. He wasn't dismissive of the other people like we find, on the horseshoe of the left and right, the people that are facing each other on extreme ends. They won't listen to each other. They won't talk. They just fight. So that's what I'm saying. It's a veneer. It's not the truth, but it's a veneer, and it made him popular.
Ann M says maybe he actually believed what he was saying. That doesn't mean he can't be wrong or unreasonable. You can still believe it. I mean,
Well, Ian says, was he a reasonable debater? I've only seen clips of him acting like an ass. The clips that I've seen were rational, but the guy goes all over the country and gives talks, and debates people. You're going to find clips where somebody, even the most rational of us, are going to seem like assholes. You're going to be able to pull together clips
but
like that.
and we've I guess we kind of had to discuss his views on the show, but and it's okay. And that's, I guess, maybe it's even good that we do discuss his views and how he was wrong, because my whole point is that I want people to think rationally, be patient, come to logical conclusions, make your decisions based on reason, not emotion. And I guess it's maybe a tribute in a way. And it certainly wasn't my intent. Like I said, I'm not a fan or an enemy of the guy. I didn't follow him, but if indeed he was somebody that liked rational discourse, then critiquing his opinions would be a tribute. But and with that, Mark, you can get the last word and the capitalist thought of
I
the
just
day.
wanted to say, Race says people mistake being articulate for being reasonable. Look at Obama. Look at Obama, but look at even some entertainers and actors who are extremely articulate, but dead wrong. People mistake articulate for intelligence. They're not necessarily the same thing. Lots of our politicians out there are articulate as hell, but they are not very intelligent. Don't mistake the two. Being articulate is definitely a weapon in the realm that we're talking about. Ann M says the fiery parts make it into the clips, and that's true. Those are the ones that are going to be highlighted. Well, folks, so we're coming to you towards the end of a week of a rather violent week, where two terrible crimes have been front and center in the news, particularly in the conservative news. And we are both the tribes are aligned against each other, blaming each other for the violence that is being highlighted in the news. And some are capitalizing on that, like the American Communist Party, for example. We don't capitalize on chaos, folks. We don't think chaos is good. We think reason is good. And what we want to do is bring rational discourse and persuasion back into society again. We want to make that popular again because we know that our rights are preserved where there's discourse. Once somebody picks up the gun, clenches the fist to smash into somebody's face, rights are going out the window. You preserve rights through this kind of process, the rational process that we call debate and persuasion. And that's what a capitalist society is. A capitalist society is a persuading society. It's a trading society. You have to persuade the other person that you have values that they will like more than the values they possess, and vice versa, and you exchange to mutual benefit. That's what a capitalist society is. It's a choosing, persuading society that respects the sovereignty of every individual. And it rejects this kind of violence that we are seeing on the stage today. So, folks, now if I'm working late tomorrow, I will be able to make Capitalist Corner. I'll do my best. I've been on a plane all night, guys.
Jim Valiant. I got Jim Valiant already, but if you can make it, it'll be the three amigos. That's wonderful.
Love it.
And Manu, don't ever assume I'm not seeing things. I am always looking at the chat.
Yeah, I'm looking at it a little more today as a result of me being on my phone because it's a little bit easier to look at the chat on my phone. So anyway, guys, go ahead. Did you want to say?
I just want to know when we can get rid of this mustache that you have. It's very distracting.
What the fuck? Where did that come from?
I'm looking at you and you've got this big gray mustache. Like you're Sam Elliott.
I'm not Sam Elliott, but I'm gonna have to keep this till around March. Sorry. So you're gonna have to see that. You're gonna have to live with the porn stash for a few months. All right, everybody. So we're gonna be here. We're gonna be here at 9 a.m. tomorrow, 12 p.m. 9 a.m. Pacific, 12 p.m. Eastern time. Be sure to catch us. We are the voice of reason. We are your island of sanity in a sea of insanity. If you want to feel sane, come to us. Also, like and subscribe, and remember to share our show from YouTube across platforms because apparently that's important for some reason. So you have to do that. I still have to do it. It's a confession. I said it, Michael. It's a confession, but I will do it. I've subscribed. I want you to subscribe, and we'll see you tomorrow. You got 23 hours to check your premises, so please do it. Do it.
Remember, join us on the Capitalist Corner where we have to live with the mustache. Take care.